Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, representatives of the sector, and also those joining us remotely. I think we are all looking for the right solutions, the right recipes for moving forward. And today we are holding this event, which is an annual event since 2017, where we discuss evidence-based solutions to be adopted for government, municipal agencies, scientific agencies, and the business sector in order to improve our overall productivity. Thank you to the Council for your advisory role in the Ministry of Economics, and we are already moving into the next phase of cooperation, and there is a clear reason why the government has chosen to cooperate with these various advisory institutions and set in motion various actions in order to achieve the productivity that we're looking for in a time span of about 4 or 5 years. The government and the public sector has a certain advantage as we have a unified set of requirements. However, the business sector has to first come with the desire to do something, to participate in these projects, co-projects with scientific institutions that the government has already accepted. But in order to actually achieve results, we need to plan out the process from the very beginning in collaboration with the business sector. So I think that it's very useful that we are involving the sector in this way. We will definitely continue implementing our industrial policy moving forward, which is based on productivity and exports and, of course, innovations, knowledge, and technology. In the morning today, we already met at an event devoted to digitization, which is another step that we're taking together. And that is why I'd like to emphasize that our joint priorities are being implemented throughout the measures being taken by the ministry as well as the government as a whole. This being the management of innovations and sustainability. And the main role of our ministry, I think, is that we have to be an intermediary between scientists and the business sector and provide incentives to continue collaboration between these parties. And I think that this conference is an excellent example of such collaboration. And I hope that as a result of today's event, we will further our collaboration. And I would also like to thank Professor Ina Steinbucke for her undying energy and enthusiasm for planning all of these events and collaborations. And of course, thank you to the University of Latvia, its scientists and researchers that are with your knowledge, we are achieving the results that we are looking for. And I'm looking forward to today's discussion which will definitely provide various takeaways and recipes for our future work so that we can move towards our joint goals working together. Thank you very much, Madam Minister, for your very warm welcome. And now I have the pleasure to give the floor to the head of the Productivity Council, Mr. Gundars Bērziņš. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, viewers, everyone interested in productivity. One of the main duties of the Productivity Council is to monitor this productivity in a process and create this productivity report. And I would just like to highlight a couple of main aspects identified in the report. First of all, the economic transformation, which we are talking about more and more, but we often fail to provide a scientific basis for this term. So this report is actually a step in this direction because productivity is both a cause and an effect of economic transformation. Why is that? It's because productivity is the thing that determines how we will achieve added value. Transformation without added productivity can actually have a negative result. But transformation, which results in more income, higher added value, brings results. And the productivity report is a sort of a roadmap for us to be able to take this productivity road in terms of economic transformation. Another thing that I want to emphasize from the report is related to an increase in salaries and an increase in productivity. And this gap is actually increasing over the past couple of years. This means that we have arrived at a situation where we are at a greater risk of losing economic competitiveness. With every step that the gap increases between salaries and productivity, we are losing competitiveness. So, how can we improve productivity while also attaching this to salaries? This is a critical point that has been identified in our report. And if this problem is not resolved, then economic competitiveness of the country is at risk in the long term. Another issue that we have already discussed and will continue to discuss in detail is the increase of business capitalization, which is probably a consequence of the changes made to corporate income tax. So this example illustrates that targeted government action provides tangible results. Why do we need increased business capitalization? It's clear that provides an opportunity for businesses to better finance their development. So this interaction between government and business sector is why we need such studies, why we need to look at productivity as a complex system. The targeted management of which can provide results across the board. So these two examples that I mentioned are just two ways for how we can analyze this document, how we can use it in decision taking. And once again, thank you very much everyone who was involved in preparing the report. I wish you all the best for today's discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you. Taking into consideration that the Productivity Council and the Productivity Institute we work according to the highest standards of the OECD and the EU. Therefore, it is my pleasure to now give the floor to the Economic and Financial Affairs Directorate General, Ms. Valerie van der.
Okay, good. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Valerie van der Meulen. I am a deputy head of unit in DG ECFIN, working for the European Commission. I work in a unit which deals with Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and the Netherlands. But productivity is not always in the core of our discussions. So when I was asked to present something at today's dialogue, I had to think a little bit, but the conclusion was that I would talk to you a bit about the link between productivity and the Latvian Recovery and Resilience Plan, which is a new facility, which has been created after the COVID crisis and which we do monitor in our unit. So this is where I come from. So before I go into the details of the Latvian the Latvian Recovery and Resilience Plan, let me just introduce the Recovery and Resilience Facility very shortly to you. So the facility was created to support member states to deal with the impact of the COVID-19 crisis. It was created because different member states were hit in different ways and because different member states have different fiscal space to deal with the crisis. A second consideration for creating the facility was also that we wanted to speed up the implementation of reforms that we usually describe in the country-specific recommendations. And therefore, this facility is now a new thing, a novelty, in the sense that there is a financial incentive to go through with reforms that have been like hanging around for some years and which we think is really necessary within a member state. As you can see on the slide, so the facility has 6 pillars, and the 2 main ones is the green transition and the digital transformation. Every plan that was submitted had to have at least 37% of the budget going to green and at least 20% going into digital. Now, I will not go through all the key elements of the facility because this is also not the main topic, but I wanted to mention just 2 out of them, which are really specific to this facility. The first one is this principle of do no significant harm. So what we try to do with that is that all investments included in the plan, whether they are now green or whether they are other investments, they cannot do significant harm to the environment. And this was included because it sometimes goes in conflict, right? The economic developments and investments can sometimes go in a counter way of improving the environment. And we wanted to make sure that this doesn't happen. So all the investments in the plan have to have this, follow this do no significant harm principle. A second element which I want to bring forward is at the bottom of the slide. It's that the instrument is a performance-based instrument. So instead of us paying for costs or invoices that member states set in targets. And this is important because it creates the opportunity to also pay for actions taken under reforms which have no cost linked to them. So if a milestone is met for a reform, then we can go ahead and pay out a certain amount to the member state. Now, this graph, I think the slides are a bit delayed. Yes, there they are. Shows a bit where these grants are going to. So if you look at the absolute terms, the most money goes to Spain and Italy, 2 countries who have been hit very hard by the COVID crisis because they have a large tourist sector. But then if you compare it to the percent of GDP, now we took percent of 2019 GDP, you actually see that the converging countries receive quite a lot. If you look at the blue bars on the left, which show you the grants, you can see that Bulgaria gets a relatively high share, Croatia, but also Latvia is in one of them, the countries that gets a relatively high share under the Repower EU, under the RRF grants. On the right-hand side, what we tried to show is a bit the impact of the RRF on the GDP. It's an estimate, and it doesn't include yet like second round effects. The blue bars show you the direct impact, which is highest in larger closed economies, while for smaller economies, the impact mainly comes from spillovers. So it's the fact that the RRF has been implemented in all the member states that create additional GDP growth for these member states. It's mainly the case for like smaller ones, smaller open economies like Luxembourg and Ireland. And in total, we estimate that the spillover effects will amount to around a third of the total impact of GDP. So it's not negligible. Now, let me go to the Latvian Recovery and Resilience Plan. So it consists of 6 components. The 2 biggest ones are the green transition and then digital transition. But there's also a component on inequality, healthcare, productivity, and rule of law. In total, it includes 85 measures and 214 milestones and targets, in total worth 1.8 billion euro to be paid out for the next years. So the RRF runs until the end of 2026. I here have a small graph showing the estimated impact on Latvia's economy. As you can see, we estimate the impact to be growing over time up until the end of the RRF, so 2026. And this is because of the demand effect, so the direct investments that are being done. But then also afterwards, we do expect that the impact will continue to pick up a bit more due to supply side effects like the return on investments. So you can see that in 27, 28, the impact is expected to drop a bit because that's the end of the RRF, but then it continues to grow even more in the future because of the return on investments. Now, my final sets of slides go a bit more into the link between the RRP and productivity challenges. As what was said before, so you have published a new report on productivity challenges for Latvia. I think the slide here kind of summarizes it all really nicely in the sense that we see the main challenges to be in the skills level, in investments in research, development, and innovation, also infrastructure needs and weaknesses in the business environment. If you put these challenges next to what we have in the Latvian RRP, some of them are being addressed, but some are not. And this is also mentioned in the report. So some issues are not covered by the RRF, so they still create a challenge for Latvia for the next years to come. Now, as I said before, so the green and the digital are the most important parts of the RRP. So let me go through those just a little bit more. So how do we expect that the green transition as supported by the RRF will lead to an increase in productivity? Well, it comes from the idea that in the framework of EU's climate objectives, the emissions will need to fall significantly. And by 2050, they need to reach a state where the EU has a net emissions at 0. And we see that there's only 2 ways to reduce emissions. Either you reduce the consumption of energy or other greenhouse gas emitting activities, or you decarbonize the use of energy. Although the first option creates a lot of opportunities, like improving energy efficiency, there's also a limit to it. We do not aim to go to an economy in which we do not consume any energy at all. So therefore, the second option, which is to decarbonize energy consumption, becomes ever more important. And for that, we think that the Latvian RRP does include several elements which are very relevant in that case. So it includes what you probably know, the building renovations and also support measures for energy efficiency for businesses, which we think that will create productivity gains, because if you have to pay less for energy, it means that you have resources freed up for other uses. In addition to those, there are also measures aimed at improving energy efficiency in transport in the plan, which crucially depends on getting people to switch from cars to other more energy efficient means of transport. And then finally, but also very important, is that the plan, as I said before, it does not only include investments, but also reforms. And one of them is a reform that aims at improving the legal framework for wind energy deployment. We think it's a crucial policy area, and the good thing is that it offers an opportunity to reduce emissions from electricity production. It reduces energy imports, and it does so without the need to invest public money. So this is a reform that should enable these onshore wind farms. And since these are already commercially viable, the idea is that the government would not support the production itself, but it would just create a framework in which these onshore wind farms can be built. Then the link between productivity and digital transition is a bit easier to make. It's more straightforward. However, we do think that the key challenge to really take advantage of the gains that you can get from technologies and investments lies within the organization and the population. So let me further explain what I mean by that. Is that in order to get the full gain, we need to make sure that there's an adequate legal framework and governance, compatibility and openness of systems to really leverage the impact. And when it comes to population, we have to make sure that the population is equipped to use the solutions that are provided by technology. I think I don't need to tell you that the digital skills in Latvia is a really, it's a challenge, as about half of the population lack basic digital skills. The Latvian RRP includes extensive investments in this area, and we are hopeful that this will help. The plan also includes a reform of digital governance, which should help improve the impact of government digital services. And the plan also includes extensive investments in business digitalization, in 5G infrastructure, and digital connectivity in peripheral areas. So I think for the digital transition, it's more clear to see what the link is with productivity. The plan also, as I said in the beginning, it also includes other components. I have listed them here, the main ones. I will not go into each of them again. I just wanted to touch upon two components. So the first one is on research, innovation, and education. The plan includes significant investments in the innovation system with subsidies to business R&D investment. But what is important is that these investments are coupled with a reform of Latvia's innovation system. And the reform aims at consolidating the governance, making innovation policy more coherent and agile. We think that one of the key challenges related to innovation policy is to make the different actors, so state, businesses and academia, all work together. They all have different skill sets and incentives, but they work together for a common objective. And the reform should help to have the fragmented policy that we have now in Latvia to become more combined. And then finally is the topics on regional development, where the plan includes extensive investments in regional development. And this can also have a potential for increasing Latvia's productivity, because the country's productivity, you can also see it as the average productivity of all its regions. So regardless of how successful Riga and its surroundings are, it is equally important to increase the productivity in other regions. And therefore the plan, for example, includes investments in industrial parks, hoping to develop a manufacturing cluster in cities with the best economic potential, support for affordable housing, which is then essential for people to be able to move to those places with the highest economic potential, an upgraded transport network and improved school network. I will leave it at that. I hope that I have given you a bit more of a flavor of what is in the Latvian RRP and how it can contribute to productivity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valerie. Maybe there is kind of one question or one comment. We won't have more time at the moment. I don't see any hands, but I would like to use my rights and opportunity and to comment a bit. I am very glad that you managed to look at our productivity report because you presented our conclusions, and my work is much easier because you already presented most of them to the head of unit from OECD, representing Science, Technology and Innovation Directorate. And I give the floor to Chiara Christodoulou. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Chiara. Please, the
Thank
floor is
you.
yours.
Let me follow up with a presentation which is, I think, very complementary to what Valerie has presented, and also to what the Professor Berzins has said. I hope I pronounce it correctly. Let me share my screen. I hope you can see it properly. And let me, do you see the presentation in full, or do you see some blank slides? Okay, perfect. Perfect, very much. So this is exactly the topic of my talk today. I would like to mention some of the performance of Latvia, not only in an aggregate sense, but also try to look at the performance within Latvian sectors. And then I will focus on one of the main drivers that were mentioned today already, which is skills, and then perhaps discuss some of the role that productivity institutions in Latvia, but also in other countries might have. So I think this has been mentioned today already, but let me say that why we do care for productivity is very much that without productivity, we can't guarantee higher wages, we can't guarantee the resources that are needed for sort of a quick green transition, and obviously we can't provide for both our future generation, but also our older generation, we can guarantee sort of the pensions. Obviously, productivity, it's a bit of a catch-all, I would say, component of the economy, because it's driven by very many drivers and enablers, education, skill, digitalization, innovation that was mentioned before, and is affected by sort of infrastructures and by policy frameworks such as labor market, competition, and so on. So it's something where I think a whole of government approach is very much needed, and everything is quite complementary. And in fact, when we think of aggregate productivity growth, we need to think of it as being driven by two related but somewhat distinct processes. The first one is the fact that aggregate productivity growth will very much depend on the within firm growth performance of different firms. And here I think it's important to distinguish between what goes on for firms that are very much the frontier in terms of innovation, in terms of productivity, but also the speed of catch up of the rest of the business population. Think of it as being SMEs, younger firms that enter the market. And these will very much depend on the diffusion, for example, of innovation, but also on adoption of digital technologies, spillovers, as well as the absorptive capacity that different firms have. And this in turn will depend on firms' skill, on their management capabilities, and on their tangible and intangible assets and their innovation capabilities. So that's where I'm going to focus my presentation today. But I should say that in addition to this, within firm growth, an important component of aggregate productivity growth is very much the capacity of firms to reallocate resources to the better performing firms and to let the least performing firms go out of businesses without causing too many costs to the economy. So this process of business dynamism and its functioning is particularly important. And here, as I said, there is the allocation of workers and capital across incumbent firms, but there is also an important process of entry and exit. And we need to see whether this process is really productivity enhancing or not. A big discussion that we are working on, and I won't have time to go through this today, but is work that actually we have done also with the Latvian researchers, is to look at what's happening, because of COVID and how COVID affected this process of reallocation. So this is something that is very much should be at the heart of any productivity analysis as well. So let me start by providing some evidence, as I said, not only on aggregate productivity performance, but also on what's going on within specific sectors of the Latvian economy. Let me thank explicitly, and I don't know if he's listening to us today or is there in the room, Konstantins Benkovskis, and again, apologies for the pronunciation, is a researcher at the Latvia's Bank and also associated with the Stockholm School of Economics in Riga, who has provided input for the OECD multi-prod project. So let me start by saying that Latvia continues to have a sort of relatively good performance when we look at the growth in terms of labor productivity over the last 2 decades. In fact, labor productivity in Latvia has grown faster than the OECD and the EU average. I hope you can see it quite clearly. It started sort of being at the bottom of the pack here in 1998 and is now really growing, has grown faster than other. And this has been very much associated also with with joining the EU in 2004. And during the COVID-19 crisis, and again, let me thank Konstantins for the hard work he has done to provide the evidence for these policies have actually managed to foster productivity and to foster this process of productivity enhancing reallocation. So COVID has actually not been that bad thanks to also the policies that have been put in place by the government for productivity. I won't have time to go through this today, but if you want, I can answer a question on that at the end. Let me also say that the good news is that productivity growth has been broad-based in Latvia. And obviously there are some exceptions. In particular, growth hasn't been as well performing in the information industry, and professional activities have seen sort of an increase in 2021, but they actually didn't perform that great since the great financial crisis in 2008. So just to say that in general, it's good news, especially for manufacturing, except for these two sectors. Now, the not so good news, and this links also to what was discussed in terms of inequality, is the fact that productivity dispersion is actually relatively high in Latvia relative to sort of other OECD countries. And we see these large and widespread and persistent differences, both at the top of the distribution, which means between the very best performing firms and the median firm in the economy, but also, and in some cases, especially manufacturing, even more between the median firm and the worst performing firms. And here you see on the left manufacturing, and on your right you see non-financial private services. So why is this bad news? We mentioned inequality. in OECD studies, we have found that a large dispersion in productivity performance is not only bad for productivity growth, and we have an ongoing study on this, but also we published a book explaining that this dispersion in productivity is actually also linked with larger wage inequality across workers, as where you work actually plays an important role for explaining your wage performance as well. So this is something that is quite worrying, and obviously a quick win would be to try to improve or decrease the differences in performance across businesses, and have sort of trying to strengthen the catch up of these lagging firms. And so that could be one way of improving overall performance, and as well decrease inequality across workers. Now, why is this not happening? I mean, when you look across the whole globe, we see that technology is becoming cheaper, it's easier to access. So it must be something else. And in fact, what we have seen that a third of this gap can be explained by differences in what we call the human side of productivity, and in particular skills, both in the workforce and in the management. And I think this is something that has been also highlighted both by the Commission, but also by the Latvian analysis. So, just to show you what this means is, we talk a lot about supporting capital investment. That, improving the capital investment by these lagging firms can help sort of explain 20% of their gap. But when we look at the human side, as I said, this explain about a third of the gap that we observe between the best performing firms and the median firm in the economy. And by this human side, we mean skills, we mean managerial structure and quality, and also gender and cultural diversity. So here, for example, workforce participation, migration policies can play an important role. Now, what our studies show is that there is a significant difference, across the productivity distribution of firms in the skill component of different firms. And by skill here, we use a measure that we developed based on cognitive abilities by different occupation, but you could have a similar figure when you look at educational wages. And what you see is that frontier firms, so firms that are at the top of the distribution, use significantly less low-skilled workers, and they rely much more on medium skilled workers, and much more on high-skilled worker. Than the lagging firm, sort of the bottom of the distribution, or even the median firm. Why is this important? Because we have seen, and this is a clear figure on this, we see that these, when we look at changes over time, has actually become more and more important. These differences much more stark over time. And so this is not differences that will disappear in the next few years. And if anything, I would say, skill advantage of frontier firm is going to become an important element of differences in performance across firms. And here, I show you exactly this, that over time, different countries are a bit different this, but you see that high performing sort of frontier firms are relying more and more on high skilled workers and less on low skilled workers. One important point, and it's going to be important for the rest of the debate, is the fact that it's not about just about difference in educational attainment, but it's also about differences in other type of skills, in particular management and communication skills and ICT skills. And what we find is that when we devise a measure of distance between the median, the bottom and the very worst firms relative to the frontier, you see a very clear sort of ranking in terms of differences in the use of specific skills, where we see that the gap relative to the frontier firms in the use and in the prevalence of management and communication skill is very large, and the difference in terms of ICT skills endowment is even larger. Now, the good news is these are skills that can be taught later on in life if the education system is working. So it's something that can be, if you want, improved much faster than if the biggest differences were in terms of educational attainment. And here is where policies can really play a role, and the, I would say, coordination between different parts of governments are particularly important to ensure that the training that is provided is actually the training needed for the different sectors and the different firms. Now, one important result of our study, and as I said from the beginning, we see that frontier firms use very much high skill, is that different countries seem to have different strategies to sort of improve their productivity, at the frontier. And here, what we see is that the skill strategy of top firms, for example, in France, and this is the top left of your screen, is very much focused on having a very high percentage of high skills. So these are tertiary or above, for example, or very skill intensive occupation. Now, when we look at Germany, on the other hand, when we look at the frontier firms in Germany, they are very much a focus on medium skilled, technical skill. And so you see very much that you can achieve high productivity, not necessarily by pushing only on the high skill, but you might have a strategy that focuses on having a good use of medium skilled workers that can also lead to high productivity. This is good news because it might be easier and quicker to get to a medium skilled workforce than really have the whole workforce focusing on achieving a very high level of skill. So again, this is good news, in terms of reaching a good results in the short to medium run. Now, let me also mention another important point for policy, which is that training manager might actually be another good strategy to achieve productivity quickly, and to do it also using probably fewer resources. Because what we see is that productivity gains from upskilling manager might actually have higher returns in terms of productivity. And as shown in this graph, you see that is 3 times higher in terms of productivity gain if I hire the same number of managers as workers. And I'm going to get back to this on the reason. The reason is that there are strong complementarities between upskilling the total workforce and also upskilling managers. So, giving training one manager actually has high positive spillovers for the rest of the workforce in the firm. Why is it important also to increase the skill of the workforce? As I said, there is a direct impact, but there is also an indirect, and let's call it spillovers, an indirect effect on productivity, which is that worker skills we find are key to boost adoption of technologies, but also to get the returns from adopting these technologies. We did a recent study focusing on Italy, but I think it's quite complementary to existing evidence from other countries, US and other European countries, whereby having a high-skilled workforce actually leads to a higher probability of adopting digital technologies such as management, digital technology, cloud services, advanced such as, for example, big data and data analytics, much more than if you have a low-skilled workforce. Secondly, and that's on the right side of this slide, you see that skills are actually very much complementary to the adoption of digital technologies. And this is what I called before the indirect effect of having a high-skilled workforce, because you get more bang for the buck when you adopt this technology. And this is the positive blue bar that you see on this graph. You see that, for example, having a high-skilled workforce gives you more return from enabling digital technology, from adopting management technology, from adopting advanced technology. You don't see such a big positive effect from cloud because, as you know, cloud is about outsourcing and giving you flexibility, so it functions in a different way. I also mentioned the importance of managers, and let me show this in terms of also why it is important to have high quality management in an era where we need to adopt and benefit from new technology. What we find is that managers can actually increase the complementarity between the skilled workers and the digital technologies, which is what I showed you in the previous slides. And here we look at two groups of firms, those whose top executive have low levels of skills, low medium scale levels of skill, and those that have high levels of skill. And in both manufacturing and private services, you see that the complementarity between labor and advanced technology is actually there only for the group of firms, is only significant for the group of firms that have high-skilled workers. So all of this is to say that policy can have an impact on productivity through improving the skills of the workforce and on the management, with a focus not only on the long term, which is on education, but also in the short to medium range with specific training on communication and management skills and on IT skills. Mention was made also by Valerie from the Commission on the importance, for example, of mobility to allow these different skills to be better managed to different firms. And so this to me is sort of the key message of our studies in this area. Now, skills and education is actually managed by normally not the Ministry of Economic Development or ministries that focus on other areas that are relevant for productivity, such as innovation, such as the digital transition. And that's why I think having pro-productivity institutions that function, that play that sort of role of being a glue and being a coordination mechanism across the different policy areas is particularly important. And I think colleagues from the Commission have to be praised for really having pushed many European countries to set national productivity boards. What we have done at the OECD is to really try to understand the setup of the different productivity boards in the European Union, but also in other non-European OECD member countries, in particular, Australia, which was the first one to be set up in 1998, and New Zealand, and so on. So this is joint work with colleagues. I don't know if they're joining us today, Filippo Cavassini, Francesca Papa, and Fatima Talidi, and is very complementary to the work that the Commission has been doing. So the idea for us is, given the needs, the structural needs and the shocks that we are seeing to productivity, what can pro-productivity institution do to be as effective as possible? We have developed an analytical framework of pro-productivity institution that builds on three pillars: the institutional setup, the responsibility and function of this institution, and then third, the way they can maximize the stakeholder engagement, the dissemination of their results, and also their influence on policy making. Now, let me start with the institutional setup. Here, in all countries that we have analyzed, pro-productivity institution function as analytical independent expert bodies, but with legal status that changes, they can be standing inquiry bodies. That's the case, for example, for non-European countries such as Australia, New Zealand, and Chile. They can be government advisory council or ad hoc task forces. In many of these institutions, there are safeguards in their mandate and their legal status to guarantee analytical independence. And to me, this is one of the key important feature of these institutions, that because of their independence, they can really give objective advice and an objective, analysis of what's happening. And for this reason, having, for example, incompatibility criteria, it's important. And this supports the credibility, the quality, and the relevance of analysis, together with having high quality staff that has access to financial and analytical resources. And here, let me also mention that having, for example, and relying not only on national experts, but also on international experts can play an important role, both for ensuring independence, but also to ensure, I would say, expert advice and trying to really gather the global talent that is in this area. An important point, and I mean, I just mentioned Konstantin's, collaborating with the OECD, having access to microdata is actually something that is particularly unique and particularly important to really understand the dynamics, the micro drivers of aggregate productivity. Yet, everyone recognizes this as important, but it's not always obvious, and it's not always legally easy in different countries. So partnering with institutions is particularly important. And partnering also with business association. I know this is the case, for example, of Latvia, where you have the business association being part of the board. And these can also allow you to expand the array of outputs informing policy making beyond annual reports, for example, using regular working papers and bulletins could be also particularly important. Let me close on this part just by saying that stakeholder engagement, dissemination, and influence on policymaking should be an important area of work for pro-productivity institution. In particular, there is a lot of difference, first of all, in the difference in which stakeholders are engaged through formal consultation, to ad hoc consultation, to stakeholder membership and advisory. But here, the important point is that productivity institutions should not be ivory towers and should really have regular communication channels with both stakeholders, but also policies. And in particular, having a communication strategy and then a strategy for outreach activity and policy influence is also particularly important. Let me close the presentation. I'm a bit over time. I think it's important to look ahead, what's coming next. And here, the institutional setup, maintaining this independence, maintaining the resources is particularly key. Leveraging this national and international talent and network can actually be a way of, I would say a way of reaching value for money by really having a common pool of resources that can be complemented with domestic sort of efforts in terms of staff, in terms of access to data, and so on. Now, in terms of analysis, there is an opportunity, and I think the OECD can play an important role here, to work more jointly across different pro-productivity institutions to facilitate joint analysis. I mean, we talked about skill. This is something that in different studies has been raised as an important challenge and an important bottleneck for productivity. Similarly, the innovation system is a second one that has come across quite highly. many productivity institutions, for example, have looked, in the past years at the role of COVID here, strengthen this collective and this exchange of analysis result and access to good quality data. It's really key and could have been a great opportunity that hasn't been exploited yet. And then in a similar vein, trying to leverage each other to improve, especially at the European level, the communication of common challenges and also possible solution. This does not mean that one size fits all, but try to really discuss how could we improve training, how could we improve mobility across even different countries could be particularly important. Let me close and thank you again for your time. Thank you.
It is my pleasure to present to you our productivity report, and I would greatly like to do so. Let me introduce myself, as I did not do so at the beginning of the event. My name is Ina Steinbucke. I am a professor of the University of Latvia and also the director of the Latvian University Research Institute for Productivity. And today I wanted to talk to you about the essence of the productivity report and also touch upon the trends and factors pertaining to productivity in Latvia, as well as talk about the investments and capital returns in Latvia. And my colleague already mentioned some of these aspects at the beginning of the event, but now let me delve into the productivity report itself. Overall, the productivity reports are all in line with a certain framework, a certain template, and in our latest report, we have looked at Latvia's situation in comparison to other EU member states. We've also looked at future scenarios, and every year we place a special focus on a certain issue. And if in the previous year, where we had basically the culmination of the COVID crisis and government aid provided to society and business. So our productivity report has focused on government support for businesses. Then we used micro data. We had about 200,000 companies that we analyzed, and then we provided these criteria to the government. In 2021, because working from home and remote working was very widespread, although it still is today, because we are trying to save energy in that way. Anyway, in 2021, we focused on the effects of remote working on productivity. But this year, we decided to focus on investments and capital returns. In our research, we also used other aspects of where our think tank is working in. So our think tank is named LV Peak. So if you Google that, you will be able to find all of the studies that we've performed. All of them are available on our website, and they're presentations and even recordings of webinars where we've presented the results of many of these studies. So I just wanted to give an overview here in this slide about the studies that we have performed and which have been used as input to our productivity report. So if we look at the trends identified, we already heard from Chiara that productivity trends in Latvia are rather promising. And indeed, we do see quite promising trends, as we are actually ahead of the EU average in terms of productivity trends. In previous years, there have been fluctuations. For example, in 2020, the increase was about 0.01%, but that's clear because of COVID. In 2021, we had a spike of 6.8%, and last year, we have data on 3 quarters. There was a slight decrease, 0.3%. So overall, and over the past 3 years, it's nothing much, but still it's been a positive trend. If we look at added value, employment, hours worked, all of these factors that characterize productivity, we see that the trends are rather fluctuating. But in any case, we are ahead of the EU average. But the bad news is that our productivity in general is actually rather low. In this slide, we see the productivity per industry, and I will not go into detail about that. But in general, if we look at the productivity of various industries in Latvia as compared to the EU average, then, and here we see the figures on that. If we look at, for example, processing, we have only 46% of the EU average. So despite the fact that we have promising increase trends, our overall productivity remains rather low. So it's below the EU average. So we are truly lagging behind in terms of productivity. For example, information and communication technologies, it's 43% of the EU average. Agriculture, there our productivity is 84%, so that's actually a rather good figure there. And another piece of very bad news, if we look at the processing industry based on technological intensity, then the figures are truly very low. The red arrow shows where Latvia lies, and it's second to last, meaning that high technologies are just 4% of the technologies used. So this is data for 2021. The EU average is 7% of all employed labor force, and Lithuania is still behind us, so that's a little bit of a good point, but still we are surpassed by most other EU member states, including Estonia and others. So where, for example, in Estonia, it's 9% of people working with high technology. So we can recall that it's been said that experience and knowledge and skills are all very important to achieve significant results. So redistribution of labor resources in favor of productivity. Here we see the red and blue circles. The red and blue circles characterizing low skill levels. Over the past 10 years, it's decreased only slightly. In terms of percentages, we see that it's from -3 to -1%. But if we look at the red and blue circles here on the right side, then the increase for high knowledge-intensive services is very small. It's 0.005% and 2% maximum. So this is not a very good result that we are speaking about here. Now, if we look at the main productivity boosters, and then it's, of course, investments and increased capital, export potential improvements, digitization, innovations. This is somewhat of a mantra that we keep repeating year after year. Now, looking at investments or rather innovations, we will actually have a presentation dedicated to innovations. We will hear from Mr. Ivars Kalvinš, so I will not go into detail here. But the innovation index in the Baltic states shows Latvia as the red line, and we see how very significantly Latvia is lagging behind Lithuania and Estonia. So unfortunately, we are significantly lagging behind our neighbors. So we need to get this red line up. And if we look at innovations per industry on the right side of the slide, but I will not go into detail about that. On this slide, we see the overall funding for research and development per capita in Latvia. Again, the situation is rather dire. We are third from last in this respect. And business funding, we are actually in the last place in this list. So economic transformation is very much needed, otherwise we will stay on the bottom of that list where we are at the moment. Digital development level in Latvia is unfortunately below the EU average, but I will not go into detail about this because I know that Professor Binde always criticizes our calculations of this, and I'm sure he will talk about this more today as well. But at least Latvia is not in the last place in this index, so we could have calculated worse. Now we see that only a small amount of Latvian society takes part in lifelong learning activities, even though the University of Latvia is, for example, placing a lot of investment in stimulating lifelong learning activities. But what else is bad? We are always happy that our labor costs are lagging behind inflation. We are not at risk of the salary increase spiral. However, we have a major gap between labor cost and productivity. We see this on this slide. So the unit labor cost are increasing very steeply, whereas productivity remains low. Now moving on to my last part of my presentation, that being the investment in capital returns. I'm moving quickly through my presentation, I have to admit. So on this slide, we see the investment trends and levels in Latvia. In 2022, our investments are still lower than they were prior to the financial crisis in 2007, and we see that the average is still lagging significantly behind the historical figures. Now, if we look at investments, changes in investment over time, here again we see that we are lagging behind. The investment gap in Latvia. Investment gap is a special term, and the gap can be calculated by various methodologies, but it is clear that this means that the potential of the investment is higher than the actual investments done. So actual investments are lower than potential investments, so that's where the gap comes in, and this is shown on this slide. Then another important aspect to analyze is the overall productivity, which is a dependent on three different factors. And here we have the results of our calculation. So capital intensity is not so bad as capital productivity is. Here we see that we're third from last. Labor productivity is slightly better. Lately, we've seen certain changes. So here we see the data up until 2019. That's the last available data that we had, so I won't go into detail about that at the moment. Here on this slide, we see where Latvia falls in terms of capital intensity and labor productivity. We are among those countries where productivity, so labor productivity is low, and we see how significantly we lag behind Sweden, Denmark, Finland, France, and other EU member states. So accumulated capital structure in the Baltics and Sweden. Sweden is taken as a benchmark here, to which we would like to aspire in order to achieve progress. And here we see that if we look at, for example, processing, so that's the red squares on the graph, Latvia has the lowest ratio here. Here we see Latvia compared to Sweden. So the difference is immense. We are severely lagging behind, both in terms of accommodation, transport, intellectual property products. We have just 6.7%. So that is truly a very dire picture there. So dear colleagues, I won't talk about my conclusions and recommendations. I will simply say that if these slides, this presentation whetted your appetite, then the report is quite lengthy, and it is all available fully on our website, so you're welcome to download it and skim it through at your leisure. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for your attention, and I will now give the floor to Raimonds Lapiņš, Deputy Secretary of State of the Ministry of Economics.
Man lēnāk garā uzliks slaidu, un es paņemšu tikmēr uzlikšu mikrofonu. Uz brīdini man būs vairāk, kad
I would like to warn you that my presentation is quite long, so we might spend a couple of days here. On my part, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me. It is a pleasure to be here. My presentation will be in two parts. The first part, that when the Productivity Council was set up, we did have certain skeptical thoughts about it, also at our ministry, but the first part of my presentation will actually be about the results from the recommendations obtained from the Productivity Council, so these recommendations that have already been implemented in practice. So, dear colleagues, could we please have the presentation? All right, there we go. So the first part of my presentation is based on the industrial policy, which was created in 2020 with a lot of contributions from LVP and recommendations from the Productivity Council. As a result, the new government declaration contains the term of economic transformation. So this does not substitute industrial policy, but in this case, it means several things. So it means technological innovations, openness to new markets, new opportunities, so exports, added value, and taking advantage of digitization opportunities. So later on, we will also speak about changes and labor force changes. So the main directions are the same as they were in the recommendations. So and the economic transformation will relentlessly continue. And if we look at investments in equipment and intellectual property, then the situation is quite interesting. And as was already mentioned today, the industries which have the lowest labor productivity are also the ones where fewer newcomers or new employees are being recruited. So those are these are the industries where they need to think about how to involve their employees in higher productivity directions. And if we look at the micro level of businesses, we see it even better for companies with low productivity and low new recruitments. These are companies that are significantly more productive than the industry average. Changes will come whether we like them or not, and this labor force will be pulled into more productive industries, especially because of salary increases, which from our point of view, is a good thing because this means that labor force is being pulled into more productive industries. As regards productivity and economic transformation, we're also often get the question, what does this mean to me personally? So I didn't want to here in my presentation mention civil servants specifically, so I've mentioned politicians, that this helps improve business environment and reduce the bureaucratic burden for businesses. This means that they can pay higher salaries and implement new products. For employees, this means that they can learn and develop new skills throughout their working life. For scientists, this means that they can identify new opportunities. For students, this means that they learn natural sciences. And for seniors, this means digital skills being learned later on in life. So this transformation alone is not enough. One issue that was already raised by previous speakers was data-based decisions. But I think that this, although this is a problem, this is the smallest part of the problem. Data quality, use of data only for own purposes, not sharing it. These are issues that the state needs to prioritize. Analysis is provided by the academic sector. Data quality is one priority that we need to continue investing in. And hardware, as boring as it may be, this analytics will not work without new hardware. So how do we fund all of this transformation? Here again, thanks to LVP, because the Latvian development plan is to a great extent based on the recommendations provided by your think tank. So we have EU funding for digital transformation, productivity, reduction of inequality, energy efficiency. But I'm very proud to say that Latvia is finally self-financing its development, and we have made more than 200 million euros already available to businesses. thanks to business organizations and Ms. Steinbucke specifically, because these recommendations actually came through the Productivity Council and allowed us to sell this to other political decision makers. And thanks to Mr. Kalvinch for the work done on the Innovation Fund. Here again, we've discussed at length the need for investments in in innovations, and this is again a result of joint work. And the Green Corridor, this is more a policy issue where we are trying to bring to life the principle that we just provide opportunities to businesses that are implementing large-scale projects. We are not burdening them unnecessarily. So industrial policy is made up of, or part of, a two-part main policy. So we have science policy and industrial policy. One lacking direction of policy that would bring together these two branches and is human resource development strategy. So we have not had this before, but finally the government has identified this as a priority to create this human resource development strategy. And if I were asked what the focus should be of next year's productivity report, I think that it should be the linking between productivity and human resources. And here I have I have more questions than answers. It is clear that society has a relatively low interest in lifelong learning. If we look at the statistics, our figures are very low for lifelong learning throughout our working life. Regional mobility, this has already been shown to be an issue. Often enough, also low salaries is unmotivating and also doesn't provide the actual chance for people to take the time to learn. In terms of the business sector, we have to talk about how to help motivate businesses to move from the strategy that if we teach our employees too much, then they'll use their skills and go away. As the opposite of this, we should actually motivate the business sector to improve the skills and knowledge of their employees. So the provided offers should be more accessible, more understandable, and the education institution should work on showing society how important it is to learn. Then, in terms of human capital, here we have the various factors involved, that being both society, business, and academics. But what have we done so far? We have forecasting methods. We have to move away from methods that are just based on drawing trend lines. This is not useful. We have to look at forecasting methods, scenarios, and based on this, we have to sort of build back from what we want to achieve, and so what we have to do to achieve it. On this slide, we've shown what we are doing right now. We have on the one side, we see what is being done right now. On the other side, we see how we could actually streamline this, and we have these three directions of economics, welfare, and education. All three ministries are sort of trying to pull the blanket into their own direction, but we have to set up an equal collaboration. We have set up a employment council where all three ministries will work together to decide what needs to be done in terms of decision-making processes, and this is already bringing results. And in conclusion about governance, where we've identified problems but are still seeking the correct solutions from what is working already. The industry expert councils are working, but the government has had incorrect expectations for a long time. They've expected that these experts will tell them what they can't identify themselves. What we are missing is the analytic part of to identify how we can use the identified issues to move forward rather than just assign blame. And we have to supplement the expert council short-term situation analysis with a long-term view. So this would be a governance solution that we need to set up, and we will certainly have lengthy discussions this year about formal education, about the school network, about the university network, what universities should be doing and in what directions they should be looking, and also about requalification of the labor force, where certain tools are available, but they cover only less than 1% of demand. If we continue with funding of requalification as it is at the moment, it will take 80 years to reach the result that we are looking for. So thank you for your attention, and I'm open to discussing human capital productivity in future. Thank you very much, Raimond, for your very inspirational presentation, and that we have been given an assignment. It is a challenging one, but in any case, this goes hand in hand with Chiara's presentation. I'm not sure if she was able to listen to your presentation, but now I will give the floor to Mr. Ivars Kalvinš. He has a lot of posts, a lot of seats that he's in, but the main issue that he works with is innovation.
Exactly, and there are many problems connected with innovation, but there are also many solutions. What I've written here, high added value roots in innovation, but in order to ensure that it is education, science, technology development, and innovative entrepreneurship that is needed. This is something that we've learned at school, and in math, we are always using the word that both halves of equal. I'm not going to talk about how science is connected with innovation, but what Latvia needs. Latvia needs to identify areas where development could be possible and needed, and then we can attract resources, innovation, science, etc. It all can be done, but it will not be a solution, because this is the same thing that we needed in 2012. So real impetus in research and development. The black line is what has been promised. Red line is what we actually got. As usually, unfortunately, we are still on the level with investments in science to year 2011. But now, although we are saying that innovation is a priority for this year, but let's have a look at 2021. Our budget invested only 84.31 million in R&D. Unfortunately, it is 0.26% of GDP and only 36.3% of overall investments in this area. It has not been increased. although we are allowing foreign investors to invest in our R&D, but then the end product or the fruit will also go to foreign countries. This is information from latest scoreboard, but here you can see this same. Madam Steinbock also showed the same. We are third from the bottom as innovator with very weak results. And this is what our ministry has calculated. But inflation is not taken into account to calculate this chart, but you can see this chart. If we wanted to continue the same intensity as right now, we would follow the yellow line. What government is ready to do something about is the middle line, and what would be needed is the blue line. Again, we are not counting inflation in. And this policy is ongoing for tens of years. And what has happened? Performance is 50.8% from average. Growth is 4.7%. In EU average is 9.9. So we are twice as bad. And every year it increases. Especially bad indicators are concerning environmentally friendly technologies, minus 40-something%, etc. Company investment in R&D, zero, minus 14%. So if we want to do something, and if we speak about skilled workers and upskilling that we've heard in previous presentation, then the number of doctors has decreased in 6 years significantly, and it is 4 times smaller than European average. In Estonia, by the way, the average is 82% in this area. Okay, but now some positive things. How to invest in public sector. Now here, the investments has increased by 6.5%. And what Mr. Lappinsch said is one of those real steps that we could do, but this is the Ministry of Economy, not Ministry of Education that has done that, because Ministry of Education is responsible for financing investments in innovation and in upskilling. And it's bad that the government is not investing in private sector. You can see that since 2015, direct investments and indirect investments through taxes have increased only by 1.1% point. It's a lot, kind of, but European average is 12.9. So we are 9 times or 10 times slower than Europe average. And overall, capital investments in R&D has increased by 27%, whereas in Lithuania, they have increased by 101%. What else? Medium-high technology expert has increased in Latvia by 1.4%. EU average 3.5, Lithuania 11.5. In Estonia, decreased by 8.5%. Science field services from Latvia increased by 10%. EU average by 21. In Estonia, twice as much. What is the reason? Latvia is not promoting innovation in public sector. We pay a lot, but we are not selling this for money. And this infrastructure that has been created by EU money has not been created for innovation. And this is the infrastructure of research, not for creation, not for development. If we look at evaluations are based on high-level publications. If we look at those, then we should say, well, we dance if we are paid, because scientists are meant to research, not create. Our goal is to research, to study things, and that's what we do. But all the time we are talking about to involve public sector scientists in the work that could create innovations. But at the same time, our scientists are not employed by companies. They don't have contracts with employers. They work in some institutions on project basis. So they are there for a while, for a certain period of time. There is no stability. Moreover, if a scientist has taken upon himself to perform a study, he is not available for other companies. If the government puts a base investment into a scientific institution, then EU prescribes that this person may not work in public sector in the amount of more than 40% of what has been allocated to him or her by the project. So you can see that the investments or base financial allocations are not. I showed you the figures beforehand, and we cannot even expect 0.4% out of GDP overall financial allocations for R&D from our country in the future. This is how it has developed, this baseline financing in millions of euros year by year. You can see that there is no growth. And this is about shortage. The blue is what can be and has been allocated, planned additional financial allocations, and what is needed in order to fulfill what we have foreseen in our plans. You do see the difference. And we see that there will not be research benefiting the industry. And majority is not understanding this. They are looking at Sweden and Denmark. Innovation with small economies is not able without public money, public support for innovation infrastructure, because there are so very many big companies that could create their own centers for research. So there are no such centers in Riga. So that's why public sector scientific institutes should be driving force, and they need financial allocations from the government and from municipalities. Those are the factors that come from World Bank research and studies, from our own studies. We don't have specialized innovative infrastructure. I'm not talking about science technologies. These are technologies or equipment necessary for the work. There are no partners. There are no clusters. There is no cooperation. What a cooperation we can talk about that? A company cannot employ a scientist if the scientist is already employed by a scientific institution. Also, the number of patents. We don't have constructor bureaus. We don't have electronics and other experimental and sample laboratories. I'm talking about innovative products. What do we have? On the left side, we have coordinated public science with financial allocation that is kind of enough, creating new ideas. But on the right-hand side, those who would be ready to have and to pay something, but maybe now we will be bridged by Innovation Fund over the Death Valley. But although we don't have the infrastructure and we don't have the capital, because companies will invest in science only when they see the benefits. Whether we want to cooperate with politicians, we believe that the platform for innovation should be growth-driven because we all want to live in a better world.
Paldies par fantastisko prezentāciju.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. Now, I hope that we will be able to stick to our schedule, and we should make our human capital study together with you, actually. So we look forward to working with you in future. Now I will give the floor to Juris Binde. Your keyword of your presentation will, of course, be digitization. Am I right? Well, good afternoon. Both digitization and innovation. Because digitization is just one component. And of course, productivity and innovations are the factors that ensure economic development and increase productivity in the economy is brought about by competition, but overall increase of productivity can be attained in two ways. The first one is the natural way called creative destruction, meaning that any process throughout its development will reach a point where the destruction of the process begins, and then on the debris of the destructions, a new level of development is achieved. The other direction is based on innovation, where innovations improve increased productivity in businesses, and therefore the individual increase of productivity brings about overall increase in the economy. Innovative processes are not linear, they are not smooth, they are based on the life cycle of various products, and we know this typical life cycle of a product where after development there's a steep increase, then there's maturity and the destruction phase. But in any case, when we begin working on a new product, it is based on the creative destruction of the previous product, and then we look at how to create this new product. A new prototype is created, tests are done, and then the product reaches market. So this is product innovation. Then to improve the product, we already reached a process innovation phase, where in many cases, in order to achieve the best result, the best productivity, we do not necessarily have to improve the product itself, but rather improve the manufacturing process of the product, or the marketing process of the product, or the operation or the use of the product. So in order to After this process innovation, we have experimental innovation, where we can create next level products, and then if that's not possible, then we try marketing innovations to continue to sell what we already have. Then we try to innovate on the business model, and then we are swiftly approaching the destructive, creative destruction phase and moving on. In order to create and implement innovations, we of course need changes to our the model of thinking, because we know that it's all in our head. And up until a certain point in time, we were living in a rather slow moving, smoothly moving environment where development was linear based on various trends. We gradually implemented improvements and modernization. Today, the world is very turbulent and dynamic, and the business environment is unpredictable, especially because the rate of information circulation has increased thousandfold. And because of this, we have to be able to live in this environment of constant change, and we have to be able to create our new models of operation, new models of thinking. And without this, we will not achieve the result that we are looking for. We have to identify a goal for the innovation process, because if we correctly identify the problem and correctly identify the target, then that's actually half of the solution itself. The better we identify the problem, the better we can identify how to resolve it. Therefore, we have this certain way of thinking called the effectuation model, and it is based on the fact that any new product is envisioned as a result. So we define what result we are looking for. We identify our targets, so we identify our available resources. So it's not what we have on hand at the moment, but the resources available throughout the world, because our modern world has no boundaries. We can find resources and partners wherever in the world. And then based on these available resources, we create this new process, new product, which will, of course, at first be a prototype. But it is important to create this prototype, because in many cases, and what Mr. Kalvinch already mentioned, about this collaboration between science and business, it's lacking because one side doesn't identify their targets and the other doesn't create prototypes. So if we have one person saying, I want this, and the other one saying, well, I could actually create it for you, but then if it's just talk, then there is no tangible result. So that is the reason why we highly appreciate the national industrial policy having been adopted. And despite what skeptics say, these two documents, the National Development Plan and the National Industrial Policy, are among the best policy documents adopted over the past several decades. And in this rather broad-ranging strategy, I'd like to highlight two elements, one of them being innovations, and the achievable results are that 300 million euro will be devoted to private private company development and investments. This is not a huge amount of money, but it is plenty to help Latvia move or boost its development in various important industries. As regards research and development, and as this pertains to innovations, we do see certain improvements if we add up all of the funding available from both foreign projects, business funding, state funding, university funding. In 2021, it was altogether 232 million euros. But as we see that the Latvia's innovation index is not very optimistic. What the innovation index is, Ms. Steinbuch already explained in her presentation. It depends on a list of factors, but the three main factors are knowledge and skills, which is a product of education and human resources. It is the environment in which scientific studies are performed. It is funding, and it is digitization, and also an innovative approach to processes and products. I won't go into detail. Do look at the productivity report. All of these ideas and concepts are explained in detail there. So what do we come to now? It is education, and the education system as a whole needs to be looked at from primary education up until higher education. Especially if we look at the STEM subjects, the situation is indeed dire. There will always be people that say that we have many opportunities in the humane sciences. We have excellent lawyers. The last centralized bar examination showed that only 26% passing rate. So that means that we know not only lack STEM skills, but also lawyers. Prosecutor General Stukans recently said that only less than half of candidates for the prosecutor positions available are actually able to pass the examination to become a prosecutor. So that means that our skills are not appropriate to the existing economic situation. They do not allow us to reach the results that we are looking for as a society and as a state. If we look at investments in research and development in Europe and the United States, the majority of research and development is funded by large corporations. And in Latvia as well, we see that companies with more than 250 employees finance more than 80% of all research. In the US, this portion is even larger. So companies with more than 250 employees, which is not actually that much, it's actually acceptable for a Latvian scale as well. These are the companies that fund the majority of R&D projects. However, in Latvia, we see that these shares are rather equally divided between various companies, and that the largest companies fund only about a third of all R&D projects. I already mentioned the understanding of what we the data that we collect, the interrelation between scientific studies and innovations that we are looking for. When we speak about science, we are usually just speaking about the research part, but the R&D actually go hand in hand. It is a complex, and many companies actually just don't register their development spending. So the situation is actually better than the data shows, just because not all data is registered appropriately. And the government and the largest companies have already started working on this issue to ensure that these data is registered appropriately. That as we have the old cartoon tell us, all pythons need to be measured by the same type of parrot. So in any case, in conclusion, we come to the basic principles that we should apply in order to be able to use R&D projects to achieve innovation and development and increase productivity. So first of all, we have to concentrate on real needs. We have many products that are wonderful ideas, but they have no real world application. We're just using resources, but not achieving tangible results. We should also pay attention to certainty and pace. So studies, research that takes tens of years, it's the same as writing your doctoral thesis that you can never complete, but then you have to finish it and then you can do anything else that you want. So we need to have these fundamental studies and then base others on them. We need to identify partners, trustworthy partners. We need to have confidence that we will be able to achieve our goals. We don't have to become fanatics, but we need a healthy confidence, a healthy ability to deal with criticism and internal motivation. We need to be more flexible. We need to be resilient and not give up at the first encounter of an obstacle, because any seemingly unsolvable situation always has at least two solutions somewhere in there. And last but not least, we need courage. If you don't risk it, you won't achieve anything. So we need certain courage, not, of course, overly enthusiastic development of needless products. But in the end, I would like to conclude my presentation with a quote saying that productivity and innovation are closely related concepts, and that is where the future of our society and our state lies. Thank you, Professor Binde. I forgot to mention that Professor Binde is not only the president of the Latvian Mobile Telephone, he is also a member of the Productivity Council, and we are very proud to have such esteemed colleagues on our council who are able to provide us with excellent ideas and development directions for our constructive work. Unfortunately, I can't give you the opportunity to ask questions. Perhaps we'll have a little bit of time at the end for a brief discussion. So, seeing as Mr. Binda has to leave, if there are any questions. Unfortunately, I will have to ask you to come to the front so that we can hear your question. Do you have any ideas on why small businesses in Latvia invest more in development? Well, we have to take into consideration that in Latvia, the structure of large companies is such that these large companies usually have public capital. And only a couple of years ago, we had a close cooperation with the government on Māris Kučinskis. We achieved amendments being adopted to legislation stating that public companies not only can but should have medium-term goals for R&D. So up until then, they were often fined by the state auditor, and even law enforcement was involved, where public companies that performed R&D were uselessly using state funding. So the legislative grounds have been improved significantly, but we still need to change the mindset of the people at the head of these companies. Certain progress has been achieved, but it's not been as rapid as we would like to see it. Here again, I'd like to note that the Ministry of Economics has done a lot in improving the legislation in this respect. Thank you. So now I will give the floor to our next speaker, Associate Professor Olga Bogdanova. She is not only a professor and researcher, she is also now the head of the Latvian National Committee of the Energy Productivity Committee. So I congratulate you on your new post, and the keywords of your presentation will be energy and productivity. Am I right?
Paldies, Ina, par pieteikumu.
Hello, thank you, Ina, for your kind words. I have the task to see this correlation between energy price fluctuation and productivity. We all have noticed last year and this year how quickly energy prices have increased and all the prices of natural resources. But actually, the trend has started already in 2021. And now, why? The causes. The first that is mentioned, our recovery after COVID-19, then generation of energy. The old technologies are getting obsolete, but the new technologies are not yet created. Also, investors wish to invest in green transformation, which is good and goes hand in hand with overall trends and priorities, although all new technologies cost more until they get a certain market share, as well as investors don't want to invest in fossil energy resources and infrastructure. Thus, we have experienced something last year because we did not have alternatives for fossil fuels. I'm here talking about gas, first of all, because historically dominating energy resource was no longer available. Also, nuclear energy amount is decreasing, for example, in France, although it seems that France is far away, but it is very close to us because the networks are interconnected. All of that created pressure on prices, as well as weather conditions. Autumn was autumn was warm. That's why the prices did not increase so much, but summer was hot and there were scarcity of water, and we could feel that on prices. Hydro energy was missing, as well as war in Ukraine, which actually completely disturbed and destroyed the usual networks of supply of energy. Here I have a chart. Maybe you've seen the prices of natural gas since 2021. The trend is upgoing. Non-precedented peak was reached in August last year, more than 340 euros per megawatt hour. Now the prices have dropped due to normalization of the market, although market reacts to many things. But if we look at the future, next winter, the price should be around 50 euros per megawatt hour. So the supply and demand will be foreseeable. Electric energy prices started growing a bit before 2021. The peak was reached in August. Here you can see the average prices per month, and in Latvia was reached the anti-record, reaching 4,000 euros per megawatt hour. What is the link between energy price and productivity? There were such a thing mentioned in previous slides. What is impeding investments? Investments are afraid of non-certainty, and these price fluctuations create uncertainty in not allowing companies to plan beforehand or making them to be cautious. That's why there is no growth. Also, at the same time, these fluctuations impact differently on different sectors as well as terms. Short-term or long-term impact on productivity is different. Because companies choose to wait and see, maybe the situation will normalize, and not to invest resources, because what is productivity? Invested resources against the result. Companies need more time to adapt, although the demand quickly reacts as soon as prices are high. The sales of products go down, but prices of resources cannot be adapted so quickly as the market is adapting to other prices. But we should look at the market in comparative figures, and this chart shows, for example, January time, when we had very good water level on Daugava. Here, the difference between Sweden was only 6 euros per megawatt hour, whereas in August, the price difference was 170 euros per megawatt hour. So if in a longer time there are many so-called peaks that actually impacts our productivity in a longer term. This is a picture from a research of Energy Council last year. This describes what worries energy experts last year. They show that commodity prices was the most worrying topic, together with geopolitics. It actually was dealt with on a very, very high level. You can see in the chart year 2020, when everything was okay in global markets, against 2021, blue and orange, a big jump or a big leap. And geopolitics is next to it, as well as affordability or ability to pay for energy. Productivity and energy price connection. Prices actually dictate preferences. Price is the language that both parties, consumers and producers, understand. Last year, many discussed fixation or fixed price and its negative effect on economy. There is always a compromise reached between political pressure, because if there is a high price time, then low income public part will be very painfully hit. But if we are artificially fixing prices, it does not allow us to solve this the cause, and the cause was fluctuation in energy prices. Thus, the problem would never be solved. It also does not allow to adapt for this situation, to choose and to change one's habit. Also, it does not allow to invest in energy efficiency. We have heard how important energy efficiency is. as well as by fixing prices, it actually promotes partition of resources in a negative way. What are the biggest challenges, taking into account those two factors and what we can do? Companies cannot be all looked at as equal, because there are companies who can adapt quickly and they are thus more competitive. If they solve the situation quicker, then they will be more productive, competitive. But if we talk about all companies together, the key word is resilience, resilience against high prices. Not what happened to the company as such, but to learn from the situation, to make conclusions, and to become resilient against shocks. How to do that? In one way, it is the government's responsibility, because no one company can come up with big changes, and how to avoid such fluctuations by diversifying energy portfolios, not to be dependent on one source or energy technologies or one network. There should be a balance, because it's typical in our country. If there is a problem, we all are heads first into solving it, forgetting about everything else. But here it is important to keep this balance. If we see potential in wind energy, it doesn't mean that we should all go for wind generators, forgetting everything else. But of course, every company can boost its own resilience in renewable technologies. Thus, companies can choose equipment that is suited for them, as well as proximity to the company. The source should be close to the company. And here we could take into account the transformation, digital knowledge, and everything else, best practices, aggregations, big data, etc. But of course, what would be wrong is that companies would rely only on countries, but the individual ability, the individual resilience should be thought about by bigger and smaller companies. Thank you. That's all from me. Thank you very much, Olga, for saving not only energy resources, but also our time. Thank you very much. Although shortened, it was very enriching content-wise. And now I'll give the floor to our next speaker. I have the honor to give the floor to Mr. Jānis Enziņš, who is going to talk about impact of bureaucracy on productivity. And by the way, Jānis is also a member of our Productivity Council. Thank you. I believe, according to the schedule, I have about 3 minutes. Okay, I'm joking. I have a wonderful opportunity because I chose a topic after most people already chose topics. And I knew that Mr. Kalviņš and Binde will talk about innovation. And I thought of taking something else, one practical aspect that has not been talked about yet, but it has an impact on today's topic. Of course, the key word when talking about productivity is innovation and education. No doubt about that, but at the same time, bureaucracy's role becomes more and more important, and I will explain why. in specific companies and their productivities, as well as bureaucracy as systemic problem for attracting investments. And in today's context, this regulating framework is kind of impeding for something to happen. What we've heard from Mr. Binde, big companies were forbidden to invest in research so far. And one more thing, if we look at big investments in science, in innovation, we always know what Ministry of Finances will say. They will say teachers and doctors need a lot of money, and we don't have money. But productivity should be simpler. Speaking about investments, there are several factors to take into account, but what have we talked about? It would be good that existing companies would become more productive, but apparently the growth process is rather slow. And if we want a rapid growth, we should attract innovative exporting companies to come to Latvia. This is the survey of Ernst & Young. They made amongst investors the environment that is innovative and investment friendly. Only 1% has given an answer to invest in Latvia. Last week, we mentioned a sentiment index, and I took one point out of this survey. Administrative burden, 74% say that this administrative burden or bureaucracy is too big. 23% say that it is acceptable. How much does bureaucracy cost every month? Let us assume that there is a regulation making that every company should do something for 15 minutes. It might not be something unreal to do something for 15 minutes. If we if we multiply this amount by 12 months, then we come up to 278,000 hours if we multiply it by commercial companies. And these hours have been spent uselessly. If we take an hour for unnecessary bureaucracy, it means it results in millions of hours. So here's the question: what can we do with 1 million hours? Something worthy, depending on where we work. It is easy to calculate. If we multiply it by million hours and add, for example, added value, we could amount or we could calculate how much we lose by this activity. Also, how much we lose not because something is happening, but because something is not happening, as well as how much does it cost for ourselves. So we increase costs of our production or service, or products of service. Also, Commission representatives said that one of the key problems was shadow economy as well as corruption. Why? Let's take an example. If an activity of a company takes a lot of time, what happens? One finds illegal ways how to do that, so going into the shadow area, or trying to stimulate those processes by giving a bribe. So we come to a root that this bureaucracy is a problem, and the root for bribery. Example, I cannot divide my land in Riga because there is kind of a small shack in the middle, shed in the middle. And it is said the firefighters should kind of go that route along the corner of the shed. What is the regulation? The regulation is the following. How to dismantle this old shed, wooden shed, 10 by 10 meters. Then I should come up with a project how to do that. Then there should be an enactment made that the place has been cleared. And the third thing is you should make a new topography mapping and ask for many people to go there. In reality, I should say I should dismantle this shed myself, and go to the municipality saying, I don't know, the shed disappeared. The problem is not with my shed, but the question is maybe we should solve those issues of unnecessary regulation for dismantling sheds. I'm speaking figuratively. And these examples make people think that some people working in public sector should be licensed. Some might go from those places to public sector, but some will be made redundant. What do we see? We see unnecessary documents requested, difficult, complicated documents, then unnecessary activities, unnecessary prohibitions, long deadlines, etc. In Riga, the process of permits for a small building takes a couple of years or even 3 years. If we talk about bigger development projects, then we do see that this term could be even longer. And what should a developer do? If a developer does not know how long it will take before he can complete the project and before he can start earning. One of our colleagues working in our Chamber of Commerce is building 2 identical objects in Latvia and in Lithuania. The costs of construction in Latvia are 20% more expensive. Wages are about the same. Building materials are about the same. What differs? Bureaucratic procedures. In Latvia. And here we are talking about projects of millions, and 20% accounts for a big sum. Unnecessary activities. Digitalization, mandatory e-address for companies. But let's think about it. If I open an email in this mandatory email address, it cannot be forwarded. Um, we cannot obtain an e-address outside of Latvia. If an investor has to come to Latvia to obtain this this signature and this email address, so we kind of scare away investors, not attract them by digitalization and innovation here. Key question. I liked our Prime Minister mentioning recently that we came to a revolutionary discovery that we have a big bureaucracy. And then Gata Šļūka published this picture, this drawing. Do you see where this bureaucracy is created? Not kind of ITs come from the space and create bureaucracy for us. What should we do? Very practical thing. But this is an issue of a state chancellery. Every week, the government should get together and probably calculate if the document they are working on requires additional documentation and additional bureaucracy. During every governmental meeting, every meeting of the government, they would also be made to understand how much does it cost and how much time does it take for people to fulfill what they are deciding upon. We have very good examples. For example, Road and Traffic Safety Department. In their strategy, they took a decision that every year we will diminish our bureaucracy by 1 unit or 1 activity. And we are all rather happy to go and do something in this institution. Also a question, are fines one of the key performance indicators or not? We should also correct some motivations or incentives, both in institutions, also among civil servants and in municipalities. And we should give more discrete power to decision makers, and we should reorientate ourselves from process to the result. If we continue doing that, this discussion will get much better. Thank you very much for this inspiring speech. Chiara from OECD asked or urged social partners and NGOs to work together. We work very actively in our Productivity Council, because not only trade and commercial association is a member, but also a president of Latvia's Employers Confederation agreed to come to present us with something. So Andris Bita, the floor is yours.
So how do I get my presentation to work here? Good afternoon. Thank you to the previous speakers. Being the last to speak, part of my presentation will be sort of an ad lib based on what has been discussed here before my presentation. I will talk about the employer's perspective and the how the process of businesses moving through various phases of development, the social expectations and the expectations of decision makers regarding improved productivity and the environment in which we are living and will continue to live in the future. I won't go into significant detail on my graphs. We've already seen this in previous presentations about our productivity status in various industries. Overall, we see that our general expectations both in society and in government is that for our productivity and our prosperity to approach the EU average. So as we see in Europe, the figures are different for various industries, but the average is shown here. And of course, in Latvia, this situation is a lot worse, as we've heard in previous presentations as well. We are severely lagging behind. One thing that I'm certain about is that this approaching of the EU average will not be quick. It won't be achieved tomorrow or the day after. The question is whether we are moving together with the countries that we started out with and with whom we have similar structures, or are we lagging behind those as well? Because if we want to be like Sweden, then we have a lot of work to do for 2 to 3 generations to finally achieve that. But if we if we have a generation to work to just catch up with Lithuania, then that is a significant problem. As was already mentioned, agriculture is already at the European average level and even has surpassed it. So it's not all bad news. The question is, what is each industry focusing on? And what is their structure? So how do we look in comparison to our friends and our neighbors whom we started out from the same position with? And here again, we are significantly lagging behind. If at first we were going hand in hand with Lithuania, we are starting to lag behind them. And the same applies for our average productivity per capita. Why is the situation as it is? I think that a great deal of the correlation between productivity and economic structure as a whole is, first of all, what is the economy oriented towards? So here the key word is export, taking into consideration the size of our country and our internal market. A second issue is the actual structure of the economy itself. How many industries do we have that have a potential to provide added value, such as processing or other industries? And here, we do not have the best position, and perhaps my analysis that I can offer of the main factors for this. We see that in exports of products and services, we lag behind our neighbors at the same rate as we lag behind in terms of productivity. And a vivid example of this is just one industry that we've taken an example here, and that's processing, where if we look at real money values, we actually have we're less productive than Estonia, that has a smaller population, and disproportionately so as regards our difference with Lithuania. And to further this idea about economic structure and the role of exports, I'd like to touch upon the myths that exist or incorrect expectations that we've set up, what decision makers are expecting to obtain from the economic transformation. Because economic transformation is a concept that is widely interpreted and understood differently by everyone. I think one of the main myths is that we will have funding and we will have increased productivity. Well, to a certain extent, that is correct. And for some companies, that does apply. But this cannot be achieved quickly. This can not today, tomorrow, the year after, by the next election. Another myth, which is often voiced by the business sector, is that we only need to support and develop the industries that are already highly productive and have successful companies. I think that Latvia's economic structure is such that we need to be able to motivate and support anyone who can sell their product or service outside. This is a fundamental difference from the position that we often see in politics. But the main idea that I wanted to discuss today is that we constantly hear that we're lacking money for investment, we're lacking money for R&D investments, we're lacking qualified labor. We have so many things that we are lacking that could improve productivity. But none of this is possible if we don't have businesses that actually implement all of this. A good education system is needed in both STEM and other aspects. But if we don't have businesses, if we don't have a spirit of entrepreneurship, then we will not be able to achieve other EU member states and the EU average levels. I recently had the opportunity to speak at the Riga School of Economics at the senior students, and I asked them where they see their place in business, and the majority of them said that they see their place as working as a highly skilled professional rather than working as an entrepreneur. So this is a problem because business development highly depends on small businesses and SMEs, and you can use as much fertilizer as you want on a plot of land, but if you haven't sown any seeds in it, then nothing will grow there. So we have to look at these issues in various aspects. Productivity will not increase quickly if we don't shift our mindset from working towards the internal market towards working more with exports. The overall situation at the moment is not really normal because most of our companies are aiming at redistribution of the internal market. SMEs are weak, national capital is weak, and they can't achieve the level where they can invest in R&D and invest in innovations. Some companies, even those that can invest or can export, are not motivated to do so, and this is also related to productivity. It's easier to find someone to give you a contract for a public procurement rather than enter the Swedish market. So here, if you're only looking at the local market, at the local public procurement, then productivity is not an issue because you can ask for any price you want. So what we should strive towards is not only to provide the opportunity to export, and although this doesn't quite sound quite right from a business perspective, we need to push companies to export. So we need to set a requirement. For example, if you want state support, then you have to export. So we need to push companies to find more ways to go outside of the internal market. Secondly, the companies that are only working on the internal market are aiming for a world where productivity will not be an issue because competition or the market is shrinking, the amount of competition is not increasing, so it's a vicious circle. To improve productivity with the help of EU funds, this is a very good opportunity, and this will help the already exporting companies. This will provide additional stimuli to develop and invest in digitization and development. They are able to see how to make these processes more efficient. SMEs, for them, we need to provide a system to become stronger, to be incentivized to go out, seek their success in the big wide world. And my colleague already mentioned that another opportunity is to bring in companies from outside that already have developed processes, but then they just provide their expertise here, and rather than just focusing on the internal market, they actually start exporting from our market. And if each local government, if each community would become a sort of small version of the Latvian Investment Development Agency, then this would be possible. It would be a viable option. So overall, high productivity is not possible if we don't have the companies themselves. For example, Latvia's Finieris is producing certain chemical compounds from the bark of trees, and they would not be able to do this if they didn't start with from the very beginning of just processing trees. So then moving on, what are the main challenges to productivity in Latvia and improved productivity? One thing that I'd like to say, and which sounds rather bold, is the fact that EU funding is very much available actually decreases our productivity because there's this temptation to use EU funding. However, the bureaucratic burden that comes along with this funding actually places a rather great hindrance on improved productivity. So unfortunately, the availability of EU funds has also created a part of society that we could call certain addicts to EU funds, that they are just looking to actually obtain the funding rather than seeking to best use it most efficiently. So what are the obstacles to improved productivity? Jānis already said everything, and I have nothing to add. So it's bureaucratic burden, tax burden. Business organizations have long since been saying that we have many different taxes, but our labor taxes as a whole are higher than in neighboring states. So the amount of money that we can invest in development or productivity, we actually use this money to pay our taxes. So our labor costs are too high for our market. Infrastructure costs. This is also related to our energy policy. We've had much higher energy prices for many years because of the compulsory procurement component. And this also reduces our opportunities to invest in productivity. Availability of funding. This is to do with the banking sector, where innovative modernization projects are not readily financed by banks. The Ministry of Economics already mentioned the specific program developed to support business development in certain areas is much more efficient than the general direction given by the EU, that perhaps you have to channel funding to a certain area of the economy. And this program launched by the Ministry of Economics is really very successful. Another positive aspect in terms of availability of funding was also reform of the corporate income tax, allowing the reinvestment of revenues. And another obstacle is the rule of law and corruption. Another element is healthcare availability for the labor force. We've performed studies with our neighboring countries that show that we pay a lot of money to finance sick leave of employees. Another obstacle that we have to work with is education level and labor availability. We have too little people on the labor force, and this will continue to be the situation moving forward. So we will have to bring in new labor from abroad in order for our economy to grow. Another element that's not shown here is the public share in business development. Public companies play a large role in our economy, and they're not always the most efficient ones. And the business sector is always complaining about something that is too little of. But one thing that they are never complaining of is their a lack of enthusiasm. But this is a problem. We lack enthusiasm for ambitious projects and large-scale projects on a global scale. Thank you.
Paldies, Andri.
Thank you very much, Andris. Colleagues, unfortunately, we don't have time for Q&As. That's why at the end of today's event, I want to say thank you to those who spoke, who prepared your presentations. All presentations will be available in our LVPeak website. Also, I would like to say thank you to a team of researchers who elaborated the report of productivity, all of those who participated in this hall, those who are not here face-to-face, but remotely. But we had a very good team. If there were no researchers, there would not have been productivity reports. I am just representing this strong team. Thank you very much. May we all have a fruitful week and high productivity. Thank you. Buddha. Bye.